On May 8, 1911, the U.S. Navy prepared requisitions for 2 Curtiss biplanes. It is this date that has been officially proclaimed as the birthday of naval aviation. In June 1911, Lieutenant Junior Grade John Towers, who will eventually be designated Naval Aviator No. 3, is ordered to report for instruction in flying at the Curtiss School in Hammondsport, New York. He joins Lieutenant Ellison there, and they will soon make many flights together. On July 1, 1911, the A-1, the U.S. Navy's first airplane, makes its first flight with Glenn Curtiss at the controls. It is equipped for 2 aviators, and it was configured as both a land and hydro aeroplane. It was originally known as a hydro-terra aeroplane, but later this is shortened to Triad for its land, air, sea capability. A second Curtiss airplane, the A-2, which is only a single-seat airplane, was delivered on July 13, 1911 in a land plane configuration. The Wright brothers were not about to be left out. On March 9, 1911, they make a formal offer to train 1 pilot for the U.S. Navy, contingent upon the purchase of 1 airplane for the sum of $5,000. The U.S. Navy accepted, and Lieutenant John Rogers, who will eventually be designated Naval Aviator No. 2, is ordered to report to the Wright Company at Dayton, Ohio for flight training. Rogers was no stranger to aviation. In January 1911, he was aboard the USS Pennsylvania when Eli made his historic landing. Additionally, serving as assistant to the senior engineering officer aboard the USS Pennsylvania, he was flown to a height of 400 feet in a Perkins man-carrying kite while the ship was underway in Santa Barbara Channel. Rogers was also the cousin of Galbraith Perry Rogers, who completed the first transcontinental flight across the United States in December 1911. Rogers often accompanied him on this journey. The Wright airplane, designated the B-1 by the U.S. Navy, was essentially a Wright Model B delivered in a land plane configuration. It was later converted to a hydro aeroplane with the addition of pontoons. By the end of 1911, the U.S. Navy now had a triple-triple. It had 3 qualified naval aviators. Lieutenant Theodore Ellison, assigned to Curtiss in December 1910, qualified as an aviator under the Aero Club of America rules in July 1911, the Navy then having no qualifying method for Navy pilots. Lieutenant John Rogers, assigned to the Wright brothers in March 1911, qualified as an aviator in August 1911. And finally, Lieutenant John Towers, assigned to Curtiss in June 1911, qualified as an aviator in September 1911. Of these 3, only Towers subsequently reported to Pensacola. Ellison is assigned to battleship duty aboard the USS South Carolina, and Rogers is assigned to schooner duty aboard the USS Yankton. The U.S. Navy also had 3 airplanes, the Curtiss A-1, the Curtiss A-2, and the Wright brothers B-1. This created a cadre of Curtiss men and Wright men who were trained with different flight controls. As a result, a Curtiss naval aviator could not fly a Wright airplane, and vice versa. In August 1911, all the naval aviators assigned to the Curtiss camp and the Wright camp were consolidated at an aviation camp set up at Greenberry Point, Annapolis, Maryland. Their assignment was to begin work on various experiments to advance the development of naval aviation, and it also included the first flight instruction for Marine Corps officers and additional naval officers. With the onset of winter in the fall of 1911, the aviators were ordered to transfer with their equipment to North Island off of San Diego to set up an aviation camp there. For the next 2 years, the naval aviators would chase fair weather. In the summer of 1912, they returned to Annapolis. During the winter of 1912, the aviators participated in fleet exercises at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and returned once again to Annapolis for the summer of 1913. For the winter of 1913, the aviators were expected to return to Guantanamo Bay. But the Secretary of the Navy, recognizing the somewhat disorganized activities of naval aviation, convened a board of senior officers to provide a comprehensive plan for the organization of the Naval Aeronautics Service. The board released their report in November 1913. One of their many recommendations was to establish an aeronautics center at a closed and abandoned naval facility in the South to take advantage of year-round flying opportunities. Naval aviation was coming to the old Navy Yard at Pensacola, Florida.